or even if you've only read the New York Times story about it, or if you've only heard the drive-by media discussing the story, you do not know the half of it. I'm looking for the headline here. I thought I put it at the top of the stack, but I didn't. Well, now, where the hell did I put this? Yeah, here we go. Let me. I did put it at the back of the stack when I shouldn't have. New York Times today. Charges seen as unlikely for lawyers over interrogations. And we're supposed to cheer. But you don't even know the half of it. If you know the details, you still don't know the half of this. An internal Justice Department inquiry, read Eric Holder, into the conduct of Bush administration lawyers who wrote secret memos authorizing interrogations, brutal interrogations, has concluded that the authors committed serious lapses of judgment, but they should not be criminally prosecuted, according to government officials briefed on a draft of the findings. The report by the Office of Professional Responsibility and Internal Ethics Unit within the Justice Department is now likely to ask that state bar associations consider possible disciplinary action, including reprimands or even disbarment, for some of the lawyers involved in writing the legal opinions. We're talking here about John Yoo, Jay Bybee, and Stephen Bradbury. So we're supposed to, oh good, they're not going to prosecute, but they are seeking, nevertheless, to destroy the livelihoods of these lawyers by asking the state bar associations where these guys live to disbar them. But you still don't know the half of it. Do you know the name John Demjanjuk? Some people pronounce it John Demjanjuk. John Demjanjuk is 89 years old. He lives in Cleveland. He is accused of being a Nazi concentration camp guard, Ivan the Terrible. He was convicted in Israel. They threw the conviction out. He's been charged with being at Sobibor, Treblinka, a couple places. He's been living in Cleveland ever since the Israeli Supreme Court threw out the conviction. He has been requested to be extradited by Germany to be tried in Germany for the same crime. His objection, now follow me on this, his lawyers, Demjanjuk's lawyers, are saying to the Justice Department, you cannot extradite John Demjanjuk to Germany. You cannot do it because he will be tortured. Eric Holder and the Justice Department have said to Germany and Demjanjuk, you're wrong. Because Germany is going to use the same techniques on you that were proposed by Bybee and you and Bradbury to interrogate al-Qaeda terrorists. In other words, the Justice Department is denying Demjanjuk's request to not be extradited because he will not be tortured. While saying that he will not be tortured, they are advocating that these three Bush lawyers be disbarred because they engaged in torture. They wrote them. This is despicable. And this is not about Demjanjuk. I'm not arguing whether Demjanjuk is innocent or guilty. It doesn't matter to me. But Demjanjuk's argument is he shouldn't be exported or extradited because he's going to be tortured. Our Justice Department says, no, it's not torture what they're going to do to you. They're going to follow the same guidelines written by Bush lawyers for detainees at Guantanamo Bay. So, that's not torture. Yet, the Justice Department, Eric Holder says those three guys, you, Bradbury, and Bybee, did write memos advocating and defining torture, and they want them punished for it. Now, you're hearing me say this. It makes no sense. Rush, it makes no sense. I know it makes no sense. It makes no sense if you're going to apply logic here. You've got to think in terms of authoritarian tyrants to understand it. One more time. John Demjanjuk, Germany wants to try him for war crimes in World War II at concentration camps. Demjanjuk's lawyers say to the Justice Department, please don't extradite him, he's going to be tortured there. Our Justice Department says to Demjanjuk's lawyers, no, he won't be tortured. They're just going to use the same procedures outlined by Jay Bybee, John Yoo, and Bradbury that we used on al-Qaeda prisoners at Guantanamo Bay. Yet, and they say that on a Monday, Then on a Tuesday, well, today's Wednesday, they release a story to the New York Times saying that Bybee, you, and Bradbury must be disbarred because they wrote memos advocating brutal interrogation techniques. Let me be clear about something here regarding the situation with the extradition of John Demjanjuk and this whole Eric Holder business. On one day, certain kinds of torture okay, certain days they're not. I didn't mean to mislead and say that the Germans want to use the same tactics on Demjanjuk that they used on Al-Qaeda detainees. I don't want you to think that the Germans are going to waterboard Demjanjuk. What the Department of Justice is saying is that regardless of what tactics the Germans may use, even if the Germans cause Demjanjuk to feel severe pain and suffering, this can't be torture, because the Germans don't intend to torture Demjanjuk. That is, you can't have torture unless there's an evil motive to torture, and the Germans, we're not going to torture him. Which is an adoption of the reasoning from John Yoo and Bybee. Whether the CIA should not torture Al-Qaeda guys unless they had a motive to cause them severe pain and suffering. If they didn't have this motive, it would be a complete defense to any claim of torture. So even if you inflict severe pain and suffering on someone, which is the statutory definition of torture, there is no torture unless the government agent is deliberately trying to inflict torture. And that was the position in the memos from John Yoo and Bybee. And it's now the Obama DOJ's position. You know, their memo said, we didn't torture these guys. Our intention was not to torture them. Here, we've got Andy McCarthy, who has done some great research work on this. He's on the air to explain this and clarify this, because I did not mean to say that the Germans are going to waterboard Demjanjuk. Hey, Andy, explain this to people in a way they can understand.
Sure, Rush. The whole idea behind the Bybee memos from 2002 was to avoid torture. The idea was to avoid having a situation where severe pain and suffering was inflicted on these guys. And what you and Bybee point out in the memo when they discuss the state of mind that you have to have for a torture offense is that when Congress passed its torture statute and when the United States ratified the torture treaty, what they tried to do was make it a very narrow crime. And in doing that, what they said was, you can't have torture unless you specifically intend to commit the crime of torture, which means you specifically intend to inflict on somebody severe pain and suffering.
Now, did they write that to give anybody cover who was engaged in these interrogations?
Well, that's the allegation from the left. My view of it is they wrote it because they were asked, what is the legal outline, the legal contours of torture? And you couldn't outline what the legal contours of torture are without saying that. And I think there's a lot of support for that view in the fact that only a year ago, the Third Circuit Court of Appeals, which obviously was not trying to create cover for the CIA, in a case that involved an allegation of violation of torture under the torture treaty, the Third Circuit Court of Appeals came up with the same analysis that you and Bybee came up with. They said that even if by sending this fellow who brought the suit back to his home country, and even if he had severe pain and suffering and even died from the fact that he couldn't get correct medical treatment in the place where he was going to be sent, that wouldn't be torture because the government didn't intend for him to feel severe pain and suffering. That wasn't the point of what the extradition was.
Okay, so where we are here is that in terms of exporting or extraditing Demjanjuk, and he's objecting because the Germans are going to torture him. Our DOJ is saying, no, they don't intend to torture him, so they're not going to torture him, and they're using the same reasoning that they are rejecting in the Bybee memos.
Exactly right, and basically what they're saying is, even if Demjanjuk does inadvertently suffer severe pain and suffering from however he's treated by the Germans, our government is satisfied that that